Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for being part of Night in the Car 2021. How crazy is that to think about? Again, I'm just so glad that you're joining us, that you're participating, that you are maybe watching these videos even if you aren't participating. We really value the partnership and the spirit of community that we get through this event. As we usually do, we want to provide you with some educational components as part of Night in the Car. This year we've had to get creative, and so you're watching a video of me talking. In the past we've done a variety of activities all in a room together, a bunch of us 40, 50 at a time in a room, and obviously that's not in the cards for us this year. So we're hoping that you can watch these videos that we're recording for you over the course of the evening, that it stimulates some thought and some conversation maybe among you and your teammates for this year's Night in the Car education. So with that said, we are going to talk about a very important topic this year. We're going to have a series of videos focusing on trauma. That's not a very easy subject for us to talk about. Many of us are survivors of trauma in our lives, and so we recognize that, and I invite you, if you find that this is too tough for you, go ahead and turn the video off and maybe follow up with a conversation with me or with somebody else from Home Sweet Home, and we can walk through some of this material in a different way. But I just wanted to say that right at the start. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to give you an introduction, talk about trauma, its effects, the importance of being trauma informed, those types of things, and then you're going to get to watch the good videos. You're going to watch videos of me talking with our case management team, asking them to elaborate on some of the principles that I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. Okay? So let's just jump right into it. Trauma is a reality for the people that we serve. This is something that we think about and we talk about on a regular basis at Home Sweet Home because so many people who are experiencing homelessness have also experienced trauma of some sort in their lives. Research in the field actually shows us that 90% or more of the people who experience homelessness are survivors of trauma. Think about that for a second. 90% or more. That's virtually everyone. So we round up. We round up to 100%. We want our default position, our default attitude, if you will, to be with the assumption that the person who's coming to us for help is a survivor of trauma. We won't know what it is most of the time, but we know it's there. And so we want to start from the place of interacting with that person in a trauma-informed way. One of the things that we think about is wearing our trauma-informed glasses or looking at things through a trauma-informed lens, right? For me, that's easy. I wear glasses, so thinking about this from that perspective is really easy. But I want you to think about putting on a pair of glasses that form a filter for your understanding. And that filter is understanding that trauma is likely a contributing factor to what you're seeing, what you're experiencing in this interaction with the other person. So we're going to talk about trauma-informed glasses. We're going to talk about what I mean by all of that in these videos and with the case managers. Okay, so let's just jump further into this subject. I want to provide a definition of trauma for you. I'm going to provide a very simplified definition of trauma and encourage you to do more investigation on your own. Simply put, trauma is an experience or series of experiences that overwhelms a person's ability to cope effectively. Generally speaking, these are situations that cause a person to fear for their life or to fear for the integrity of their identity as a person. And they just feel helpless. They feel hopeless. That's our definition, our basic starting point when we talk about what trauma is. Over the years, we've learned more and more about these experiences, that there's a wide range of experiences that produce traumatic responses in someone's life. The point of emphasis I want to make, though, is it's not the event itself, it's a person's experience of the event. So two people can go through the same event and have different reactions. One person may be traumatized by that, and the other person may not. That's where it gets tricky to understand trauma, because it's not about the event, it's about a person's experience of the event that's influenced by our internal and external supportive factors in our lives. So that's really the basic definition of trauma. And so I'm going to move on from there and talk about what it means to be trauma-informed. And there are 4 main parts that I emphasize when we talk about being trauma-informed. The first one is understanding trauma and its effects. I just gave you the definition that we use to think about trauma. So that's an important part about understanding trauma. But trauma can affect us in all sorts of different ways. Not only can it do that, it does do that. It has very real mental and emotional effects. It affects our mental health, the thoughts that we have, the emotions that we experience, the intensity of those emotions. We see that play out in all sorts of different ways. So it has real mental health and emotional effects. It also has biological or physical effects. Our bodies are physically impacted by traumatic experiences. In the most extreme situations, we have a head trauma that physically affects our thinking and our brain functions. But under most traumatic experiences, there isn't that physical trauma so much as there is just the experience itself that produces it. Even when there isn't a physical blow or damage to our brain, we see changes in how our brains are functioning, how our brains are structured. There's a lot of research that goes into, or that has gone into, the effects of trauma on the human brain and on the human body. And it shows very, very strong change and influence on how our bodies just physically function when we're survivors of trauma. Another way that trauma can affect us is obviously through relational disruptions. Having difficult patterns of interaction with people, having disrupted intimate relationships or family or friend relationships. That's a very real effect that trauma can have. There's a whole lot. I could spend hours talking about the effects of trauma. For this video, we're not going to do that. What I will do is I'll point you to one of the most prominent studies into the effects of trauma on human functioning, and that's the ACEs study. It's the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It was actually done over 20 years ago now, but it still is one of our most strong examples and opportunities for learning about how trauma affects the human body and the human being. Right? And so I would encourage all of you, after this video is over, after you've thought about this and maybe talked about it, or maybe as you're talking about it, pull up on your phones or on a computer at some point and look up the ACEs study. That'll help you understand trauma and its effects even further. But we need to keep moving, so I'm going to move on to the second part of being trauma-informed. The second area of focus when it comes to being trauma-informed is focusing on safety, prioritizing safety. We want to be both physically and emotionally safe when we are interacting with somebody who's a survivor of trauma. The simplest way I can put it is don't be imposing. Don't be imposing. Don't be imposing physically or emotionally. Give people their personal space. You might need to give them more than their usual personal space. We've gotten pretty good at that this year, so hopefully we're all recognizing ways to do that. But intruding into somebody's physical space when they have been hurt by someone else, either through physical abuse or sexual abuse or through some other violent interaction, that can be a very re-traumatizing thing. We don't want to do that, right? So give people their personal space, their physical space. But also give people emotional space. Respect their boundaries. If they're not wanting to talk about something, we respect that. And we understand there's something else going on here that we need to have more time and we need to have more space for the person to feel safe in sharing that. So when I talk about giving people space, I mean it physically and emotionally, where we want them to feel like we respect them and we respect the boundaries that they establish with us. The third point, I'm going to jump right to the third point of being trauma-informed. And that third point is helping people rebuild control. Fundamental to the experience of being traumatized is that people feel helpless, out of control, and even hopeless in their lives. So helping people rebuild control directly combats those experiences and reminds people that, hey, you know what, this is safe. You have ownership over what's going to happen right now. And so helping people rebuild control is an important part of being trauma-informed. The best way to do that is to give people choices. Give them as many choices as you can in your interaction. Our case managers do that. You'll hear some examples of that. Our front desk staff do that when we give people choices on what they do next, or where they can sit for dinner or what have you. We give people choices all the time. We want to give people as many choices as possible because that reminds each of us that we have a little bit of control. Might not be a lot of control, but we have a little bit of control. We want people to feel like they can control what's going to go on for them. So give them choices. The fourth aspect of being trauma-informed that I want to emphasize with all of you is to think about people from a strengths-based perspective. What does that mean? If I ask you to introduce yourself, what are the things that you're going to tell me? You're going to tell me the things that you feel good about yourself, that you enjoy, that you get a sense of accomplishment or pride in when you think about yourself. That's how you introduce yourself. You don't introduce yourself by listing off the problems that you're experiencing. None of us want to be known for the things that we struggle with the most, right? So we want to think about the people that we're interacting with likewise. We want to think about them positively. We want to think about them created in the image of God, just like each and every one of us is. Think from a strengths-based perspective about that person. That reminds us that we're talking to a real person. That reminds us that we're talking to somebody who has hopes and aspirations and helps us not define them by their circumstances or their struggles. So thinking from a strengths-based perspective, that's our fourth major point. Again, there are a lot of things and a lot of details that I can go into on each of those points. We're not going to do that. I would lose you if I recorded that long of a video. And so I just wanted to cover those four basic tenets of being trauma-informed. What you'll see in the videos that are to come after this are conversations that I have with different members of our case management team. They're each going to talk about one of these aspects. Thinking from a strengths-based perspective, helping people rebuild control, focusing on safety, and quite simply just trying to understand how trauma affects us. Those are going to be the areas of focus of our videos with our case managers, and I hope you enjoy them. I encourage any of you who have questions to reach out to us through the ways that we've made available to you, and then even after tonight is all over and you're rested again, if you want to have further conversation, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with you about this or any other aspect of what we do at Home Sweet Home Ministries.